Hello everyone, Tom Morley here with video number 6 in the Space Blasters video tutorial series, and this video is going to be on creating the necessary behavior for the main class. Now that we've got some additional scenes, we need to flesh out the behavior of the main scene so that we can start incorporating like the HUD and the spaceship and some other things. So let's go ahead and fire up Godot. Let's load our Space Blasters 84 project. Let's load up the main scene, which is the SB84 main. And we're on the 2D tab. So when we left off in the last video, this is where we were at. We added the HUD to the main scene so that we have the stars scrolling, we have our info label from the main scene here, and our heads-up display as well. So we need to add the additional behavior into the script of our main scene. So where it says SB84 root, click on that script right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to delete everything that we had prior to this. So go ahead and delete all of your code up to extends node. We'll keep that in there, and we'll add from there. We're going to need 3 variables. We need to know when our game is running, so let's add that variable, game running. Of course, it's going to be false when we first start up. We're going to need a score variable, so let's create that. Score equals 0. We'll also need a variable to hold the high score. All of these will equal 0. We need our ready function. We'll set up any initial state of the main scene itself, and here we want to tell it to enable the process function, because we're going to need it to update things in the game. So we will say set process to true. Of course, if we set it to true, we need our process function, so we need to write it in here. Process delta. Now here's where we're going to change the behavior just a little bit. We know about the different inputs that we get for free, but we need to modify it a little bit. So let's, I know that the very first thing I'm going to do is if my input dot is action pressed, right? We're going to see if an action is pressed, and we're going to basically see if we want to quit the game or not. But I don't see, when I scroll down here, I don't see anything that says UI quit. So if there's nothing here that I got for free from the Godot engine, then I have to create it myself. So let's go into the project settings, and let's click on the input map, and let's create the UI quit. So up here underneath action, you can put in UI quit, UI underscore quit, and you can click the add button, and that will add the UI quit to our input map, but nothing is mapped to it. If we want to maybe map the Q key to UI quit, all we have to do is click on the plus button, tell it we want to use a key, and it says press a key. We'll press the Q key and click OK. And you'll see that now I have in my input map a UI quit with the Q key. So go ahead and close that. So now when I go back to my code and I tell it I want to look for something in my input map, I scroll down, there's my UI quit that I created. So basically when I hit this loop, this process function, the very first thing I want to do is see if I want to quit the game. If I want to quit the game, then I have to just call the command that will actually stop everything. It'll actually quit the game and pop me back to my desktop. So we're just going to say quit here. So now if I run this and I press the Q key, it pops me right back to my desktop. So that's the very first thing I want to do. The next thing I want to do is see if my game is running. So if game running equals true, that is, my game is running, what do I want to do? Well, I need to have two additional functions in order to get the behavior I want out of the main scene. And that is, I need to create a run game function that accepts a delta, so I can basically call it all the time. And I also need a start game function, and that might be where I load my levels and so forth. So what I'm going to use this process delta for really is just to get input from the user. Let's make this just a little bit of a comment so that we know what I'm using this for. Just input from the user to start or stop the game. So really that's all I'm going to be using this for now. So if the game is running, I want to call a function. I said I need two more functions, so let's create those functions here. I'm going to have a start game function. For now we'll just put in pass so it doesn't yell at me. And I want to create a function that gets called over and over again. We're going to call that run game. And this has to accept the delta because we'll be using the delta for updating things in our game, if I spell it right. And again, we'll put in pass for now. So if my game is running, then I just want to call this run game function. I just want to call this over and over again. So if my game is running, I just want to call the run game function. Else I want it to kind of be checking for more input here. Is action pressed? And at this point I want to know if somebody presses the return key or the enter key. So that will be the UI accept. And while I'm on this particular part of the code, let's go into the input map and let's clean things up a little bit. So we'll go into project settings and click on input map. For UI accept, The only thing you want in here for this particular game, you can leave in the button press, that's fine, but the only thing I want to see in here is the return. If you have anything else in here like accept or anything else, you need to delete that out of there. So like this space, we don't want that space to be in there, we just want the return. So we're going to delete the space by highlighting it and pressing the garbage can icon over here, and that will delete it from the UI accept. So now the only thing that will be mapped to the UI accept will be the return key and some buttons from a gamepad if you have that, and we'll click close. So the only thing that will trigger this will be the return key. So if somebody does hit the enter key, we want to start the game. In the start game function, we'll put a comment here. This will be where we load things up. Maybe we'll load the game level or whatever, etc. Game level and other things. So we know that we need to set up some initial state. At this point in the game, we want to make sure that the score is erased back to 0. So our score is going to equal 0. We also want to set that score on our heads-up display. So we've added the heads-up display here. Now let's use that. So let's get a node. And we want to get the HUD root. So just scroll down to HUD root, press enter. So let's set the score. And let's pass it what the score value is in our game at this point, right? It'll be 0. So we're going to pass it the score. We want to give ourselves a notification on the label that we created in our main scene. Remember that? So we're going to get that node. And that's just label info on our SB root. There it is right there, label info. We're going to set the text on that to running. And we also need to call the function on our heads-up display and tell that we are going to be running the game. So whatever state you need to be in when the game is running, we need to trigger that. So we'll get that node. And that's in the HUD root. And we're going to set, oh, we need a dot there, dot set running. So we're going to call that function and put the HUD in its running state. And that's it for the initial startup of the game. Now when the game is running, and that's what this function is going to be for, when the game is running, this is just going to be the running loop. This is where we'll have most of our logic for the game. So if, very first thing we want to check for is some inputs. Is an action pressed? And at this point we want to know if somebody pressed the escape key, right? So that's the UI cancel. And again, while I'm here, let's go and look at that UI cancel in our input map. So go to Project Settings, Input Map, and let's look at UI Cancel. If there's anything else in UI Cancel except for the escape key, and you can keep the gamepad in there as well. If there's anything else in there, don't forget to delete it, 'cause the only thing we want in here is the escape key. Okay, and we'll close that. So if somebody did press the escape key, we want to basically stop running the game, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to say game running equals false. And we also want to get the node for the label in our main scene here, which is the label info. Right, we're going to update that and let the user know what's going on. So we're going to set the text on that. To say, hey, the game is over at this point. So we're going to check to see if the current score, because we're playing the game at this point, if the current score is greater than or equal to the high score, then the high score is going to equal the score. Let's update the high score. Then we want to get a node. This is where we're going to put the HUD that we created in the game over state, right? So let's go to the HUD root. Let's set the game over, and it expects the high score, so let's give it the high score. So if it's not being canceled, we need to check it for, so we're going to do an elif to check for another condition. We're going to do an input again. Check for an is action pressed. And at this point, we want to be able to increase the score. So we need a way to do that. And there's a UI select in here that we get for free. And that UI select is the spacebar. So we're going to say if the game is not over, we haven't canceled it, check to see if somebody's pressing the spacebar. Again, you can check this out by going to the scene, project settings, and look for UI select, and you'll see that it's a space key right here. If there's anything else, again, other than the space key, delete it. That's all you want, is the space key. Close. So if somebody's pressing the space key at this point, we want to increase our score. So we're just going to say the score. Okay, it's yelling at me because I didn't put a colon up here. So the score equals the score plus 1. We're just going to increment it by 1 if somebody's pressing the space bar. Okay, and we need to get a node, right? We need to update something at this point. We want to get the node for the HUD root. And we want to set the score, right? So whenever somebody does something with increasing the score, we need to update the heads-up display so that we can see it. And it expects somebody to pass the score to the heads-up display. So we'll pass it to it, score. Okay, so we just changed the behavior slightly. We didn't do anything major from what we had before. We still have the ready function. We tell it we want to use the process function so that it gets called over and over again. I'm using this process function just for the user input. So if they want to quit the game, they can always quit the game, and they can also start the game anytime they want. So this loop will be called all the time based on what key they press. Then if the Q key is pressed, we quit the game. If the game is running, then we continuously call the run loop. And this is again where I'm going to have most of my behavior of my game is going to be in my run game loop. And of course, it's when it first starts up, it's going to be in the game running false mode, and it'll sit there in this loop until somebody presses the enter key. When they press the enter key, we hit the start game function where we can set things up. You know, the initial state of the game, score goes to 0. Maybe we load level 1, so on and so forth. And then we set the game running. And I didn't put that in there. That's a good thing that we went through that. So the very last thing I do in start game is I need to change the game running to true. Otherwise the game's never going to run, right? So glad we kind of walked through that, the logic of the code. So we're going to save this scene, and we're going to run it and see what happens. Okay, so it's running. We're going to press the enter key, and because I pressed the enter key, the heads-up display went into its running game mode, and my score was set to 0. If I press the space key, we should see the score go up, and it does as I press it. So, and if I want to simulate the game over, such as like an asteroid hit the ship, I'm going to press the escape key now, and that should go into game over mode, and it did. And it saw that my score was 42, which was higher than the previous high score of 0, and it updated the information. So if I press enter again, it should go back into running mode. And it didn't. So let's take a look at that. Okay, I see the problem. Right here where it says game running equal false. I'm just checking to see if they're both the same. That's not what I want to do. I want to change the state of my game running variable. So game running equals false. Now everything should work. Let's click play. It pops up. If I press enter, it goes into running mode for all of the different pieces of our scene. You press the space bar right now and you see the score going up. If I press the escape key, it should go into game over mode, which it just did, and it updated the high score to what my score was. And now if I press the enter key, it should blank the score out and we start again. And if I keep the score lower than the high score, 22 is lower than 40 whatever, 40 something, and press the escape key, it keeps the high score here. So press enter and let's go up to 50 or 60, 80s, and it updates the high score. So it's working the way we expect it. And we should also be able to press the Q key like this and it ends the game. So that's all we really need to do at this point. Is I needed to add a couple extra functions, and that was the start game and the run game. So I just wanted to put the entire code up here again so that if you didn't catch it all throughout the video, here it is. So there you go. That's how easy it was to update the behavior of our main scene so that we can start getting a game that looks like a game. Press enter and we can fire off some bullets and blast some imaginary asteroids and escape to end the game and Q to quit. That's going to be it for this particular video, and in the next video we will be doing the sound for the game. So I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.